We'd like them to do is have a parliamentary hearing, a commission, meet with First Nations, provincial governments, Quebec governments, whatever.
No, right there is where you're gonna reach, where you need to have the solution is when you're presenting that this is what we need to have. As long as the government is going to continue to meet with its puppets, which is the band council system, that you are never going to have the solution, because the solution only lies within the traditional governments. Now, within Kahnawake, there is something that is happening to facilitate this very thing.
Who represents First Nations and if it's not the band council?
Okay, now that question that you are making right now just comes from lack of knowledge within lack of knowledge of the Native people. Now, if you knew anything about the Native people, you would know that that band council system, democratic system, has only been within the Native territories, especially here in Akwesasne, within the last 70 years. As a matter of fact, within Akwesasne, in order to bring in, not to bring in, but to force that system upon our people, a man had to be killed in order for that to come in. So now the answer to your question...
Then who needs to be at the table?
Who needs to be at the table is that the Canadian government is fully aware of who needs to be at the table. It's just the people are not aware, and who needs to be at that table is the actual chiefs, not chief imitations of what a chief is. Because when you have, under the band council system, you have a bunch of people who are referring to themselves as chiefs, but all they are is elected officials. Okay. Now, it's those chiefs who must be at that table to negotiate, because what the solution is from those chiefs is something that is already happening in Kahnawake. What's happening in Kahnawake is there's a movement within that tobacco industry. And that tobacco industry, the movement is called the KTA, the Kahnawake Tobacco Association. And that association is working towards an equal level playing field with the outside non-native communities, such as, I believe you represent
Canadian communities.
Convenience stores? Okay, now, same thing in the community surrounding Kahnawake. The convenience stores were upset. Now, in order to have balance, because, you know, ever since the non-native has been here, there has always been a balance with the native communities, with our non-native brothers and sisters. Everybody knows that the native people has always shared our wealth, our common wealth. It has always been shared. The only problem is that the people, the non-native people, have been undermined by your government. As long as you are undermined by your government, you cannot have the proper control over anything. So what this KTA is doing is working to bring a balance, a certain level, at the same parity with the outside. And that would bring a certain level of reducing the organized crime element. Now, the organized crime element is something that we are working to work out of us also. But as long as the Canadian government continues to say that your right isn't your right, it's illegal, organized crime will be there, because the ultimate person who is benefiting off of this, as you identified, is not that person in Akwesasne who's making $300,000 a week. Because you know what? The person who he's selling to obviously has to have a lot of money, a lot of organization. That is organized crime. That person is making 10 times the amount of that person in Akwesasne who's making $300,000 a week. And that's the person who is not putting back into the community. And the native people are putting back into the non-native community.
Sir, we need to move
enormous amounts of money.
And certainly respect that if we need to, it's not just the band councils, it's chiefs, the tobacco industry on the First Nation land need to be at the table.
Exactly.
Okay?
But it's something the government has to recognize. The government is not recognizing this because, like I said, they want to demonize. They want to demonize right now.
Yep. having the government recognize the issue is probably one of the biggest issues we hope to accomplish tonight. Is we need some leadership at the government level, because ignoring the issue is simply let it fester. And there's collateral damage. I mean, unfortunately, 3 people died within the last 2 weeks.
Oh, there's been a lot more than that who have died.
Sure.
There's been a lot more people within the Native communities who have died as a result of this by having to be forced into the corner to have no alternative but to have connections with organized crime. And those connections have brought a lot of strife to our communities because of the federal government's action.
Part of that collateral damage.
I'll leave you with this.
It's part of that collateral damage that's happening on First Nation. Because
it's not happening on First Nations. It's happening in Ottawa.
Sure it is.
That's where it comes from.
But it's also created some criminal MO that shouldn't be there on First Nation.
Well, you know what? You can say that too about the criminal organizations that are in Montreal. The criminal organizations like you identified earlier. You know what? The grenade launchers, the AK-47s, we didn't manufacture that and sell that to us. You know where we got that? We got that off of you guys. That's where we got it. We didn't manufacture that. But the thing is, what I'll leave you with here is that I'll give you a little bit of a warning as to what to be careful about. Be careful not to demonize, because right now, the public, the non-native public, is just as fed up as the native people. They are fed up with their own government because their own government is screwing them. The government is screwing everybody over at this time, and everybody is feeling the effects in the economy. You continue to demonize the native people, it is going to have devastating effects further on the economy. The native people, the Mohawks in particular, if you learn your history, the Mohawk people have always been a deciding factor for the European people who have been here in Turtle Island. Now, the Mohawk people have always, like I said, shared and have always been willing to work with those people. The only problem is that it's not the people. The people are fine. We've always gotten along good with the people. It's the government that is the negative aspect. So just be careful. What I see here is demonization of the native people. And that will creep up and bite the Canadian government and public in the ass.
Thank you. And if I've offended you in any way, my apologies. That is not my intent. My intent is to have those nations, First and Canadian, and the provincial governments meet. Solve it, guys. So show some leadership. Because you know what? Cornwall is, unfortunately, at the hub. And this is probably the community that's seeing the most of it. But it's happening everywhere. Newmarket, when we did the butt study, had the highest level of children smoking.